are Soma Games. We're doing a talk on Fred, all about Fred. Why? Because Fred likes Fred. And that's actually where this whole thing started from. Is when we first made the first terrarium, it was in Flash, and we wanted to do it because we wanted to test a concept of how a creature in Arc, which we're going to try and release later, interacts with itself, the environment, and how it moves through its states. Fred is a very simple creature. He's very dumb. Fred knows how to talk to its other Freds, and it knows how to smell food. The blue circle is how far Fred can talk. That's it. He's in space. Really, he just kind of loves. The green circle is his olfactory senses, where he can actually sense food. And then there's a little red circle is when he becomes a swarm or a herd. And then they go to the spiky asteroids because those are food. And when they're done, they disperse. They start wandering in because they're satisfied. They don't need to be with other Freds as long as Fred's around. When a Fred is alone, Fred will start searching for another Fred so he can have a friend near him because he's a group person. Fred likes Fred. Fred likes Fred. Fred likes to be around Fred. Otherwise, he'll just wander forever. The wander mechanics are simple, and we'll go through that. But this is the initial test in Unity, it's a Unity build, for what Fred will become when he becomes fully 3D in a 3D environment. And so, in Arc, you're a spacecraft, but that spacecraft has been tainted, and so it smells like food. And so Fred isn't very smart, and so Fred will try and eat you. And that's bad. Especially when a big swarm comes after you, because the swarms will be faster than you while they're trying to eat you. But that is what we're going to talk about and how we made that. Any questions so far? Okay.
What you said something about terraria or terrarium?
Terrarium. So
Okay.
it's like an aquarium, but in space.
Okay. Terrarium part is, Earth, and space is terrarium.
Earth's in there, or something.
Sure, let's call that Earth.
Yeah, I don't think that's Earth.
I don't
That
think,
might
do
be
they have a
close.
space area?
See, it's better to say terrarium,
Rats,
right?
whatever.
People know what it
Where
is.
do they
Space area.
Also, just as a frame of reference, we started working on this on Thursday, and we've spent around 10-ish hours on it. So it
Perfect.
looks really cool, and it looks like there's a lot going on, but it's actually fairly simple.
So yeah, the initial terrarium in Flash probably was about a day, day and a half, and then the report was just about 10 hours between two of us. So as we said, Fred has 3 simple hunger levels. Satisfied, hungry, starving. He moves between those. And he has different speeds. And then how we set up his AI to make it so he wants to be in a group or near a Fred was AI states. And so it's basically just a simple state machine with simple logic that only happens once every second. That's how often Fred thinks, 1 second. He knows how to act constantly at your frame rate. But other than that, he's kind of like, I like just being me. All right, so this is his think routine. Well, I'll have to go through the whole thing. The first part of it is determining if he's actually in a herd, in a swarm. If he's in a swarm, there's only one purpose for a swarm. That's to find food. And so he gets put in the state to hunt, because he wants to eat. And then, if he's not, then he can be either satisfied, hungry, or starving. A satisfied or hungry Fred likes to wander around and find friends. If he has a friend that's around, he'll just wander, just simple 40-degree left or right movements, and he just kind of ambles around randomly. If he doesn't have a friend, he picks a random location in the terrarium and goes to it, hoping to find a friend on the way. Once he does that, he'll stop and go back to wander. When he's starving, he'll ask his friend, are you in a group? And if his friend's in a group, he joins that group. If he's alone, or his friend doesn't have a group, he makes a group himself and then joins it. And then the group searches for food using the mechanics.
Yeah. And then the other thing is when they're in a group, any friends that it finds along the way, it says, hey, I'm looking for food, you should join me. And as long as the friend is even moderately hungry, he's like, yeah, food sounds good, I'll join you. And that's how you get a swarm, is you get basically a leader and instigator, and then they all kind of join in together and basically do a random search. Pattern is the wrong word. The group kind of does the same thing as Fred when he's trying to find a friend, but instead they're trying to find food. So all of the individual Freds are trying to stay close to the group. Their destination is the group's position itself. And then they're constantly using their food senses to basically be like, hey, is there food for me? And if any one of them finds food, they communicate to the group, hey, I found food. Everyone's like, oh, food there. And then they all go straight for it.
Who chooses the direction? Is it the original Fred, everybody?
The group does.
So,
So none of the individual Freds, once they're in a group, has any ability to other than follow the group. And the group decides where it needs to go.
the group itself is actually like a higher level of consciousness. It's like that nightmare AI state that they always talk about with computers, where like a whole bunch of computers collectively get together and form a higher level of intelligence that then is going to take over the world. It's the same thing here. A whole bunch of friends get together, they create a higher level of consciousness to find food.
So then it actually has a separate processor cycle at that point? I mean, it's a separate step in the think loop?
No, see, you're thinking that the herd and Fred are the same, but they're not. And so the herd is actually its own separate class, has its own cycle, that all it does is find the location, go to that location, and wait for Fred to tell me that he found something. In which case, I'll stop moving, they'll eat, and I'll disperse.
Okay. And when you say herd, you mean group, that's the same term?
Herd, group, swarm, yes.
So you just mean it's like its own AI process that uses the Freds as sensors.
Exactly.
And then you can have multiple herds running at once?
Yes.
So they separate, okay, and then they each get their own loop.
They get their own loop, right. And so the wander is a simple,
Sydney's asking.
Oh, so why did you decide on making them as a collective AI to become smarter? Because some different types of species, humans are a great example, are when larger groups get gathered together, the collective mind actually gets dumber.
What are you talking about?
If Fred got any dumber, he would like die. So
the idea behind that is that while Fred is docile, when Freds get together and Fred wants food, Fred understands what needs to happen. And when a group of humans all have one singular thing to do, and then the task is big enough to effectively done by that number of people, it will be better. Now, most of the time when a group of humans get together, they don't have a really defined task, or the task is too small for the number of people, or the task is too big for the number of people, in which case it can't be divided up correctly. But when 100 humans get together and the only goal is, you know what, let's find something to eat. But let's follow this imaginary system that is like, I know I need to follow this car, but I can kind of go off path because I'm faster than that car. But when I find food, I'll tell the car, and the car will tell my friends. And actually, in this case, I will tell the car will tell me also. I don't actually know if there's food. I just tell the car, and the car will tell me where to go. So that's actually how it all works. Any other questions? I like your question. But,
Well, I think one of the mechanics also was a gameplay mechanism, so we wanted to create something where a couple small loops would create at least the appearance of complex interaction, and because then they become an enemy. So the question isn't whether or not Fred gets smart, the question is if he gets more dangerous. So from the
I could agree
gameplay
with
perspective.
dangerous. I
Yeah.
could agree with dangerous for sure.
Because an individual
Because
Fred attacking your ship
they're
doesn't
not
matter.
any
Yes.
smarter. Like, the only reason they become smarter from the view is because they have a larger range to be able to find food, which is smaller than their communication range. And we added sliders to well, when I do a different demo, I'll show you when you change the sliders what will happen. We wanted to kind of make it so you could change everything, but we found out that, especially right now, the speed differences are very important to keep at a certain level, or Fred gets lost, because he's not smarter. And so it's like if he's too much faster than the group, herd, hive system, he goes past and then turns around and then he's lost. And so it takes him a long time to catch back up. He's like, guys, I'm alone. It's like, well, you shouldn't have gone too far. And then if it's too slow, they become a big capsule. Just a line of Freds. Right? You can't see. And you're like, dude, really? And so, like, your question is like, well, usually when they get together, like, you know, they get the smarter. No, I don't even say everybody. He can just sense farther.
You just call it convolution.
Don't do that. That would be bad.
I'm
Like, where'd my Wonder script go? Oh, that's where it went.
Next time we'll be deleting random lines of code.
What was that?
Really, it's
Coding Russian roulette.
How we started this was like, okay, let's make Fred longer, and then it was like,
See what happens.
and you just add the functions as it goes along, because if you make them, you know, typical OOP programming, make a little function that does one specific thing. And that way it's easier to understand when something's broken. For the AI state, instead of it being directly related to how you do things, we added behaviors. Because things such as find friends, the first thing Fred does is I'm going to search for friends, which means he picks a random location and goes to that location. On the way, he's like, hey, is someone near me? If so, then I'm done with searching for friends, and then the next step is to go near my friend and then start wandering again. The same thing for eating. Once they find food, the first thing to do is go to the food. Once I'm there, I can eat. And part of that is I actually attach myself parent-wise to the iceroid. So if the iceroid is moving, I move with it. That way we don't have to continue to make Fred smarter. The iceroid will do that for me. And so we set that up because then you only have to think once, but you can act constantly. Because you go through your loop and ask, what's my current behavior? What do I need to be doing at this moment?
So you said that Fred thinks once every second.
Yes,
Is that to reevaluate his current state?
correct.
So if he passes a Fred, another Fred in that second, but hasn't evaluated whether like a friend Fred, although he probably isn't moving fast enough for this actually be a situation. If he moved too fast past a friend, another friend Fred, would he miss that friend?
So this is why the
Philosophical.
behavior is constant, but the thinking is not. And so technically, if you move past a friend, you're not going to move past the find friend state, which won't change it, but won't change your behavior, because you're still searching for friends or going to a friend. It's only when you actually switch a state. And then there's the hierarchy of states. When I have a Fred friend, I wander. If I don't have a Fred friend, I find a Fred. If I am starving, I either join a group or create a group. If I'm in a group, I hunt. And that is set up in the AI state with numbers so that we can then decide, it's like, if I get a new state, do I want to keep that state? And if I don't, ignore it.
So just kind of with your question, is it that like Fred passes another Fred and then at 1 second he realizes, oh, I saw another Fred, so I'm going to go move to him?
No, and so that's how the state is. So basically, every 1 second, Fred asks, what should I do? This is once a second. Every frame, Fred evaluates his current task. And that's why they're different. And so this is his AI state. This is his behavior state, what he's doing. And that's why they're separate. so that we don't have to constantly, every single frame, go, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do?
So
What do I need to do?
inside of the what should I do, his
It's-
behavior state, he can look for and change direction to find a friend, or
Correct.
to move to a friend inside the 1 second.
Yeah, and so,
He'll change
the-
direction there, but he won't found him there.
so this is the
State will
list
change
of,
there, the next time he'll
so
round.
this is the list of behaviors, and so each behavior has a function, which, search for friends,
That in between the 1 seconds, he says. He sees.
I think I remember when you guys were when you guys were working on this, you guys were talking about the boss constantly handing over the soldier to the worker. That's what this is, right?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's really kind of.
Was that, I think I heard someone during this conference give an analogy of the boss constantly hanging over the soldier of a worker. Where in this case, it's the AI is the boss asking, what should you be doing? Have you completed this task yet? While the worker is the behavior. That's what this is, right?
Yeah.
So instead, it's the boss is going away for a second, coming back every second versus every frame, correct?
so, yeah, and so like, under 1 second, one task would be find a friend, would you write that there? Find a friend. And find friend has the behavior search for friends and go to friend. And so search for friends is here. He sets his navigation speed, because he needs to go faster, because he's a little scared. He determines if he's near the target he's asked to go to. And then determines if he has a destination. What we have there is, when he's wandering, he doesn't use a destination, he goes there. And so we set the position that he's supposed to go to as a max int. And so we're just checking, it's like, hey, is this a valid number or not? If not, he gets a new random destination from the game controller, which is somewhere in the current terrarium to go to. And then if he's close to that destination, picks a new one. And then if he has a friend, and how he gets a friend is just a trigger-based collider. So he goes by Fred, he goes, oh, I have a friend, I add Fred to my list of friends, and then I'll know that that's greater than 0, which means I remove the behavior, search for friends, which will then say I need to go to my friend, which is a different function. Here, same update the navigation speed for the same speed. And if I have a friend, which I should get here, take the current position of that friend and start going towards him. And then once I get close by, remove all AI state, because I don't care anymore because I'm happy, which will be the first thing that happens as he goes back to wander mode. Does that make sense? Poor Gavin. Any other questions? You know, I realized I didn't introduce. My name is John McLaughlin, lead developer. Gavin Nichols, he is our technical artist, so he makes things pretty and work. I just make things work. That's all I do. And then Chris is our CEO, Chief Creative Officer. Yeah, that's what it's called. So he's Siegels. That's his professional job.
He's the head, Fred.
No.
Second, he's at your desk.
Hey guys, you hungry?
Keep getting
If you get 100 friends together, will they achieve sections?
I sure hope not.
Do they have
That's why
preference
we
over
only spawn
Freds?
7
Are all Freds the same?
Yes.
Okay. I just think it's
Head off 1 to 2.
a funny picture in my mind. You have a friends list of all Freds. And
Yeah.
it's hard to find which Fred you really, it just doesn't matter. It's a swarming thing.
It's a group thing, and so it doesn't matter how many friends Fred has, as long as Fred has a friend. But why I made a list is because that way I can have a Fred come in trigger, and leave a trigger, instead of having actually ask the trigger, do I have someone in me, which is expensive. And so it means that we have a function.
No, you can.
Starfish,
You should almost go with some starfish, actually.
Oh, right. So you have Fred found and Fred lost. And if Fred's found, you add him to his current list, and if he's lost, you have to then search through the list and delete that one Fred. So it's a little more expensive because we're actually keeping track. In G, we have one where we're tracking, I don't remember what we're tracking. Oh, when your missile is in a cloud We increment and decrement a number to determine how many different clouds you're in. But we couldn't do that here because we have to be able to ask, do you have a group? And because of that, we need an actual instance of a Fred to be able to talk to.
We need to know, I need to know more than just how many friends do I have near me. I need to know that I have you, and you, and I have you, but I don't have Dan. Dan is not in my group, only you three. So that I can say, do you have a swarm? No. Do you have a swarm? No. Do you have a swarm? Yes, I'm going to join his swarm.
Which has a simple logic for joining and leaving a herd, which is the same as exactly what happens when a Fred joins and leaves a friend list. But the other one is when the friend list goes to 0, then the herd, swarm, group deletes itself because it's no longer necessary.
You
All
said
the
you have
friends are
it
left.
in a list object.
Yeah,
Right, and that, because you guys are in C#, it looks like, or?
that is correct.
And list is basically, it's a standard, a template, or, sorry, a standard library of a modification of an array.
Yeah,
But just,
so you can put it. It's if you come from C++, it's like a vector.
well, yeah, okay, yeah, because I did C# first semester, a couple semesters
Okay.
C++,
Yeah.
so
It's just
I
using
would use
the
list.
generic questions list, where you can use list and then data type.
so it's
or
essentially, it's like a vector then.
yeah, it's just like a vector.
And
It's
grow and
just,
shrink and all that.
yeah.
You can
but
switch
instead of
vectors.
push and pop, we have direct access to everything, and we have an app.
Okay.
So it's more of a real list versus a vector, which is kind of like halfway between a list and a cube. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
There's also neat helper functions like add, remove add, remove last, remove first.
All that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, as we said, with a herd, it only has one task to do, and that's move myself to the destination. And the same functionality, pick a random location, move to the location. If I'm close, pick a new one. And the game controller has the...
Does that use the same 40-degree angling as well, or does it?
No, and so that 40 degree only happens when you're in the wander state, which means you're not going to a destination.
Okay.
Fred's just like, dude, I'm gonna meander. And so he has a simple meander AI to make it so he moves around.
So the search one is like gonna be just
Yes.
bouncing all over that.
Yeah.
The search one is, I have a point. It's a random point, but it is a point, and I'm going to that point. With the wander one, it's, I'm moving forward, but not in any, I have no purpose.
But the wander one looks a little more organic, whereas it sounds like the search one could look like Fred walked out the door and realized he left his keys inside and turns around and goes back in, right?
Well, that's exactly.
Never mind, going the other way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you get lost in the supermarket as a, 6-year-old, and you're gonna look everywhere random, like, where's my parents? I don't know, They're 6, you don't have the full,
Right.
search capabilities of, I should go to the front and, ask them, you're gonna wander. Freak out.
First Yahoo process.
See, and we had a lot of questions. People were like, well, how did you do that? You can set up a big, I was like, no, Fred's dumb.
Well, but still, the 40 degrees still it made sense even on the search, because at that point, if I turn around and go backwards, chances are food hasn't appeared behind me. I guess I don't know the mechanic yet.
And I guess the answer is it's actually plus or minus 40 degrees. And so
Right.
it's a big ability to go, and it's random how much he goes. So technically, by definition, Fred could go in a straight line forever. Because Fred's dumb.
Yeah, and the group isn't smart enough to do like search patterns. It's just, I wonder if there's food over here. Nope. I wonder if there's food over there. Nope. I wonder if there's food back over there. Nope. And so it's not really smart. It's just,
But that's
all
on
gonna be
purpose.
with me. Yeah. But then, yeah, exactly. It's on purpose.
The purpose is to keep Fred an idiot.
Yeah.
And still have him do something interesting.
Right, and so you'll see now that you understand how it works, that, all the white ones are no longer, are just satisfied. And so they were just wandering, if they had a friend. And then hungry Freds, which are yellow, will join a swarm, which is for someone that's hungry. And then a hungry one always makes a swarm. Starving.
And what's the darker color?
The red.
Red is
That is a starving Fred. He needs food and he needs food now. And then
Do they
these are just simple, no. So like, this is the thing, is Chris and I, we had to talk about this, is like, you know, what would you add to this to make it better? One, make it so they can die. And we actually had ideas where, you know, Fred likes
Let
Fred.
me go there, like, don't cover that yet.
Oh! Off, I'm not gonna talk about that.
We will shortly.
So is there any food on this map at all?
Yeah, so there's this one, which is food, and
You haven't found it yet. Wow.
no, see, and this is what we're saying, is like, he's not smart, but he looks like he's doing something interesting, which makes it more effective because the coding is simple, which means it's easier to change, which means you can do something like, well, Fred's dumb right now, we're gonna give him a chance. We're gonna increase the, for how far away he can actually find food.
Did that guy found it?
Yeah, that guy found it, he's good. And you can also like, you know what, let's make it so Fred can communicate really well. And because it's just a simple number and a simple trigger, you can change those on the fly constantly to see what is the best way to make Fred look interesting. And when we did this, and so we set it up this way for a little while there earlier, and I'll try and get there, and made it so everyone was fed. And then when we did that, we made it so their food went down to nothing. And we're thinking, oh, this will be perfect because they're never going to be able to find food. But what happened is because they can communicate so far that I talk to Thomas, Thomas keeps on talking, and even though the food is actually outside the building, they talked all the way down the list. They're like, oh, we're in a swarm, oh, we found food, and they all wandered the food. And I'm like, well, that's not what I wanted to show. But it was interesting. It was interesting because it was different.
So they stop looking once they're fed
Yeah, once they're fed, they go back to their wander state.
until they go back to red,
Yeah,
starving.
When they're in the wander state, they're not in the swarms, they leave the
correct.
swarm, right?
They leave the swarm,
So
they're in
they're
the
no
wander
longer-
state, and they need to be
So
near
they're
a
trying to
friend.
find food together because they communicate with each other.
Yeah,
Okay.
Do swarms combine?
no, that is one thing we want to do, but
Oh, they don't, that's why, okay.
yeah, they don't combine.
They
And
don't
so you can
combine.
actually, like, this poor little guy here,
He's in his own swarm.
just swarm, he doesn't know what's going on.
So swarm of one.
He's a swarm of one, and as you can see, Fred's no longer intelligent because he's alone.
He looks like he's wandering though, as opposed
Yeah,
to
he
random
keeps
locations.
switching.
So what you see here is the red circle is the group, and his when he's hunting, what he does is, as far as where he goes, he's constantly trying to get to the center of the group. And so he goes past the group, and then he turns, and so he goes back and forth. And that's how you
It's
get
kind
that
of 1 second
swarming
swing
look.
then there.
And that's so that's why we're saying is like we wanted to just make it so you could change the values for speed for whatever, and it needed to be where it was close, but not too close or too slow. And so this is they're moving max speed right now in a
He
swarm
almost
of
looks like
20.
his friends.
What?
He almost looks like his friends right now.
Yeah, it looks like it was grouped up.
And now he has a whole bunch of friends, and
Well, because they got hungry, but they were around him, and he was already in a swarm, so they joined a swarm.
yeah, exactly. So
They're doomed.
he's hungry. He's
And now you see the communication right there.
So why are
He's leading the friends
is it
astray.
because they're not looking for food, right?
They're hungry, and
So
so
blue is full.
blue is full,
Okay.
yellow's hungry, and so they don't really need to find food. But a guy came by and said, "Hey, I'm searching for food." And they're like, "Okay," you're twisting my arm.
I'm
Fred
hungry now
always says,
too.
I like to party, like that's what he's all about.
You know,
He's
if
like-
me and John were friends, it's basically we ended up me calling up John. Like, John, I have not eaten since yesterday. I absolutely have to go to Burgerville, but I hate going alone. Can you please come with me? And Fred's, and
I'm
John's
like,
like,
I guess I could do that.
And it's like I'm hungry
See,
too.
look, now they found something.
And so, yeah, now
Oh,
they,
yeah.
they entered the communication, they're like, oh, okay, we can do this thing. And then they slow down because it, you know, we designed this to be where it was like, oh, it's not that far to get to food. But then when you make a communication range, you're like, oh, they could be across the map.
So is that scaled? Like if you make the communication range smaller, they'll not slow down as much?
Well, they will slow down the same amount, but they won't be able to talk to their friends. And so you could do
Oh.
something like this,
Yeah,
where
but-
every single person can find food really easily, but they don't ever get in a swarm because they can't communicate.
The green is
The green is food, yeah.
okay.
Green is food, blue is talkie-talkie.
And so you can kind of see it, but like this right here is the ability for Fred to talk. This is him being able to eat.
Are you drawing the circles through Gizmo?
No, they're just.
This is a custom shader I actually
Yeah.
wrote myself. It's it basically, I call it an alpha rim shader. It's basically a rim light and then the transparency, so that basically all you see is the rim light.
So that's
Which is
actually
really
a
useful.
sphere.
Right.
This is actually really useful for effects like this.
Yeah.
Where you just, I want a line around it. I kind of want it to look a little pretty. So.
Yeah, it looks prettier than it
You
Gizmo.
rotate this in 3D space, you still see the,
Yeah, like if you move the camera, that would stay always facing you no matter where you're at
Yeah.
because of the shader, like fireworks.
Sure.
Like fireworks.
So if it was like a cube, you would be able to see, and it would look,
cubish.
Exactly.
So that's Fred. Because Fred likes Fred. Any other questions? Do you want to see any other parts of the code that I didn't show you?
So, sorry to, you had this list of things that are happening here off to the side, well, a couple different places here that are happening, but none of these say when you're transitioning state. So which of these are the state transitions and which of these are the actual doing an action?
Okay, every frame doing an action, every second we determine what actions to do, change the state.
So state transitions just on the second.
Yep.
So the stuff over here is actions, not state transitions that are listed down below.
Correct. These are actual, like, what
Down
we're
the
going to
bottom
do.
there,
Yeah, this is do a thing based on the behavior that I need to do.
So when he has a little arrow that moves from, until there's a nearby friend, and then go to my new friend, that's not a state transition, that's an action?
That is a behavior transition.
Okay.
His behavior is I'm going to search for friends. And when I'm done searching for friends, because it's set up in a list, we remove the first state that you're doing, which means any behavior that is stacked up above it will then become the first one. And then they'll start doing that behavior.
So it's kind of a state transition at that point then too?
It's a behavior transition. I wouldn't call it a state because it is changing what action he's doing, but it doesn't change what AI, I'm doing this. And so
Okay.
think about like generic versus specific. And so I need to make a salad is his state. And each one is get lettuce, get tomato, get
Okay.
blue cheese, get Parmesan, mix. Each one of those is behavior, but then the whole time his AI state is, let's make a salad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is a hierarchy.
So, like if you on the code, it's actually two different enums that are going on.
Yeah.
Like this is AI state,
Well,
this is,
well,
This is actually a list string.
So the AI state is an enum like you saw. The list, the
yeah, the
actions
string.
are
It's just
strings.
strings.
the strings, yeah.
The
We
way I
can
think
change
of
it to a noun, but
But the same concept.
The way I
You
think
couldn't
of
spend
it is,
11 hours getting that? Come on.
actually no, we got done like 20 minutes before coming in here, so. Yeah, about 30 minutes ago, we didn't have colored by hunger state. They were all constantly, and so it was kind of hard to follow. I was like, what are you doing?
so that's a lot easier.
And then an hour and a half ago, we didn't have the rings. It's just Fred flying around doing things.
Let me know if I'm interrupting what you're about to do. Like, the reason we wanted to do something like this, and this happens through lots of ways, is because we're broke. And we're looking for anything that we can do with a small amount of work, we can leverage into lots of stuff. And so, like, if a little bit of code can be tweaked to create a wide variety of behaviors and interesting things, then that's just efficient. And then you can focus on gameplay mechanics and fun, and you're not just like trying to create a huge body of stuff and interrelated systems. That can be really expensive and time consuming. But if you can build incremental systems that create at least the illusion of complex behavior, that's stuff you can really work with. So we know that Fred likes Fred, and then we're like, where could you go with that? And one idea is that Fred feeds Fred. So once Fred starves to death, he becomes food. And that might sound sort of nasty, except that it's totally biological, right? And so they're scavengers. These are basically like tidal critters. But if you start having like just a little bit of tiny things where it changes the dynamic radically, just changing their sphere and their speed, how many angles they choose, you have this like totally different behavior without really changing anything but a number. Other things that would make entirely different environments for this guy would be, for example, if there became a current. And so say through the middle of the screen is a thing that imputes a certain amount of speed in this direction. Then anytime Fred is swimming with the current or against the current, we have the ships passing in the night thing, and so these dynamics all start to stack on another without us really doing anything. And so from a studio perspective, these little systems, we've been building dozens of these little things over the years, and we just start to stick them together. So the notion, for example, behind G was try to like, what can we do with one thing, basically gravity, and then you start to add one little incremental thing, one little incremental thing. But we start spending our time on some of the things like story and art, and we're not forced to burn a bunch of time with basically making assets and systems that become increasingly complex. Because I think for the player, a lot of the time, for Fred, they just need to, like, Fred's dangerous. That's like, does he give the impression of being scary under what conditions? And so you can imagine kind of this gestalt people of watching this field and saying, I need to navigate my ship, from here to here. Somewhere in here, my brain starts to go like, okay, start to see where these guys are going, what's happening, and I try to weave my way through there, without them attacking me. But you can't predict it necessarily until you start to understand the system, and then we can mess with that on the fly. The same thing kind of happened with Redwall. Is like, we wanted to figure out, there's a huge world that you could play in that space, but we don't have the shop. We don't have the shop to make Skyrim. Like, it's not going to happen. So like cut off your options at the beginning, and don't try to bite off more than you can chew. This is one of the examples of a system try to keep Fred stupid.
Yeah.
Right. So Fred feeds Fred. Fred fornicates with Fred at some point, but it takes 3. And so we're going to have the idea, like, when we get 3 or more together, they'll multiply. And so with like 1 seed, or 3, I guess, you can start to see how does this evolve naturally, and we don't have to code that, right? We don't have to have assets. We don't have to make it up. It makes itself. It's really inexpensive, and it's also different, right? So it's going to change every time based on some basic random numbers. So does that? I hope that explains like what's the nature. Because you might ask like, this is. Yeah, so what? Like, how does this matter, especially from any particular game or an AI exercise? How does it benefit my studio? How does it benefit the project? And the reason why is because it's efficient, or at least that's one of the reasons. And you don't know what you're going to get, which is also fun for the designers. Like, who knows what's going to happen with Fred? He's going to do his own thing, but we didn't have to tell him what to do. Fair enough? Okay.
And then,
So every so often I see a random red circle.
that's the herd. That's the group that they're joining. It's a circular representation of where that group is going.
Oh, where the group is going.
Yeah, and so, yeah, like, that's the active position of the group, and everyone's trying to find that follow the red ring, and then when the red ring changes where it's going, they've got a new location.
Is actually, would be really interesting is a level for Heartland.
Yeah. Actually,
And, the ships that you control are the food that gets sought out.
Oh, that'd be a heck of a thing. See?
Oh, yeah.
So I think that you got 400 lines of code in there. It's not expensive. It's really simple stuff. Maybe
They're pretty lightweight lines of code too, that's.
Exactly, and there's a lot of empty
white
space, and so even when I say whatever it is,
So like,
game controller was
also.
142, the herd was 84, Fred was 555, his ability to communicate was 47, detection should be almost the same, yeah, 54, the ice droid was 52, and 28 for the setting slider, and that's all the code for the whole thing. Everything you see up there. I mean, we took visual assets from G, obviously, because we had an ice droid for free, and we had the grid background for free. But that's not that hard to find. The asset store for Unity is really great for trying to find them, things like that. And so, yeah, it was total. That was probably like 800 lines of code for the whole thing, and it's easy for us to then remove that and put it wherever we need to go, or change it if we need to have the behavior change. Or, as you saw, it's like we can add a behavior by just adding a simple string and an is statement and a function. That's it. That's a new behavior we can do, and we can enter it into their AI state, either as, for search for friends, maybe instead of search for friends going to a point where it's like we want a point, but we want him to actually then send out a simple ping. And so he actually be able to send out a search ping, and if he hits somebody, he'll move his target to that person to try and get closer. That's a simple thing to add, but doesn't require us to change the fundamental design of the AI and how it works.
So I've noticed sometimes Freds go completely off a screen and come back in, so there's nothing keeping them in the boundaries.
Only find friend, hunt, keep you in screen. When a Fred is near a Fred and he's in the wander state, we don't ever restrict him to be on screen. And so that's why I was like, technically right now, if everything's set up right and they always turn the same way, you could have two Freds leave the screen and go forever. Until they happen to go just a little too past, and then they both freak out and start going back in.
I noticed that Fred can move through the ice stream.
Oh yeah, there's no colliders.
Okay.
There's no.
Okay, so there is
Stuff
part
like
of the
that.
code actually trying to keep them on the screen.
Yeah, and so find friends and hunt, there's a little invisible box that we use to pick a random location because we know our boundaries. And so that is right here, pick random location. We have our minimum, maximum values.
Oh,
Just
okay.
randomly choose those, set it back as a location, and they'll use that as their destination.
Oh, and that helps keep the majority of Freds on the screen.
Yeah, until they leave on their own, because they're Fred, and they're not smart.
So you could kind of do with that kind of, I mean, obviously you have the box for the border, but if you wanted them, let's say you only want them to come out at a certain time, you could have nests, so they,
And then make it
you
so
just
that-
add another function, go to nest, you know, when you're full, you go to your nest.
Exactly, and
And then,
that's an AI state. AI state go to nest, and you can make that the most important one that you didn't turn off based on some.
and it's like the
bullshit.
condition is once they're full, and then,
Yeah.
and when
then they
they're
go
hungry
here.
again, then they go out and look for food.
Yeah,
That's also, you just hit on something that I don't think we touched yet, which is importance of the behaviors, which.
I did, but go ahead.
Okay, I don't remember, so I'm gonna talk about it. Basically, we have ordered the enumeration of those behaviors such that every time he, meets the conditions, if he meets multiple conditions, which is, perfectly possible, he always chooses the one that's more important. So, the wander is the lowest importance, and then if I can find a friend and I can wander, I'm going to find a friend because that's more important than wandering. Here we have join group and create group. That's separate.
They're, yeah, go ahead.
No, this is go to the enum because the enum is in the right order. There we go. Okay. So wander friends is first, find friends is next. Create group and join group are ordered such that if there's already an existing group you can join that. Otherwise, then create a group, and so that that way.
You don't create a whole bunch of groups and they never join them.
Exactly. And so
Who's the gentleman who looks like Frank Zappa? Who's in it for a minute? And he was doing the infinite recursion terrain generator.
Oh, Daniel?
Daniel.
I'll just call it Frank Zappa. So if you think about what he was doing, which was basically like procedurally generating a whole world, and then procedurally generating dynamic AI, you've got basically a populated world almost for free. You can't use that in all cases, but in some cases that could just save you just so much time and energy. And these could be, these could be crabs, these could be dogs, whatever it is, they could be orcs. And so they all have sort of their own behavior, which is a couple things. You should put these two things together. This should have to be in space. But if you make it 3D or you change how that's done, it's a really tidy system.
You make a whole village that actually is thinking and living.
Yeah. Or at least they give the impression of it, right?
Well, yeah, and then you can make 500 villages with
Exactly.
flyers.
Mhm.
That's crazy. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
see, that's what we're talking about. And so, can we zip it?
Zip it, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll make this available for anybody who wants it. And so we'll just put it on the Soma website. We'll update it to a WebGL Unity, have it live. It will overmatch the current one, which is somagames.com/terrarium, or art/terrarium.
Will the code be available? Or
No, that's what I'm doing. We're gonna zip the whole code up for you.
Okay.
So all you need is
This
Unity
Unity
5, which
project.
is free to download, and it will run in that version. We obviously have Pro, but that's because of Microsoft. There's no differences anymore for playing. It's just mostly.
And you could just,
there's no engine features.
Is
You
your
just
guys'
put
main
in a-
website just somagames.com?
Soma
or?
Games, yes.
you could
That's
put in
awesome.
an
Thank
asset
you.
for Fred
That's really
without
cool.
changing anything at all.
Yeah, you'll be able to hit go, and it'll just work just like we have there, and the sliders will be there. you'll want to go through, like, the biggest one that might be useful is, right now there aren't any Freds because we generate them dynamically, but we have our Fred model. And in Fred is the Nandari script, because that's their proper name instead of Fred. We gave them a better name than Fred, but Fred's easier to say. But you have your time between here, time between think, hungry, starving, how often he twitches, time between wander. And you can just change those numbers on the fly and see how it changes the system. We wanted to make like a big control panel for all of those. We just didn't have time in our 10 hours. So yeah, it's all there, it's all public, you can just straight in the editor. And then you go up and you hit apply, and then that will apply to the prefab. So then when it gets randomly generated by the game controller, it'll all be there for you to see how it changes.
Are there any like particular variables that you guys would be interested, like what sounds interesting, like let's tweak that, let's tweak this? What
Well,
would
I'm just trying to think about if I was gonna use this with, you know, like you were saying, like with a village or something, or with a herd of animals, what I would want
Yeah,
on
I kind of, well, the idea of that, instead of just wandering, eating, like that they either die, like you guys are talking, or both, like they die and then when they're done eating, they go back to their nest, or even competing
Sure.
Freds. You
Sure.
have Fred and Ned, you know, and they're all competing over the same
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah,
that. If you had swarms, they could fight each other or something.
And so,
Yeah, that'd
like,
be
and then
pretty
when
cool.
they
Combat
die,
swarms.
maybe they would eat the Ned. Freds would eat Ned, and Neds would eat Fred. They wouldn't eat themselves because that's cannibalism, you know, kind of thing.
well, but the idea of like a feeding frenzy for sharks, right? Once they
Right.
get in that state, like they eat anything next to them. That's a
or
really
that too,
easiest
yeah.
thing
Maybe
to
if
do.
they're, you know, if they're hungry, if they're starving, then it's a feeding frenzy for them.
Yeah,
They're just
for
like,
them.
I'll eat whatever. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm only gonna eat Neds. And I just, like the idea of them having a purpose outside of just eating. But like, obviously, you guys said, but
Yeah.
that would be something.
Well, but we
to
didn't want a purpose bigger than that. Like that is the goal, is to keep them really stupid. So
Well, they're still, yeah, they're stupid,
Yeah.
but they go home at night to their stupid
Right.
wives.
boy, I
Not
didn't even say
condoned
that.
by Soma games.
No, they're just
You
as
could
stupid as Fred
also
though.
deviate away from the animal herd mentality and more towards the zombie herd mentality, where you can modify where larger groups move, or larger groups have a higher success rate of getting whatever food it is, and thus they actually would prefer to congregate in larger masses as they go by. So you could go with that as well if you wanted to.
And that would be
type
really
of
easy to put
species.
together.
Yeah.
Probably some of the variables that are really,
You'd just be messing with some of the variables you have here.
yeah, and the idea that, in this case, the food never runs out. That same eye story is always there, and they somehow never remember that.
They're stupid.
They're incredibly stupid. But the food should deplete, right? So yeah, so there's the one kid that gets eaten by zombies, but now that kid's no longer food, right? So what happens when the third guy gets there is like, oh geez, no, I'm still hungry.
It just
Right.
keeps walking in a straight line.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to add, is make it so an iceroid could deplete, because if you can deplete an iceroid, that way, once they're all depleted, sooner or later you get to the starving state, and it's like, well, now I'm dead, and then you move into food, and then you can have your constant
Replenishment.
replenishment, and see how it goes, see how fast it adds, things
And
like
it
that.
And this also brings up the idea of how some bacteria and viruses work, where some are very constant, where they infect enough or they eat enough that they stay at a constant rate, while others take over and kill so many things so quickly that it burns itself out like wildfires.
Yeah.
So I think, I would guess that you might want to run, if you're going to go along that route, you should run like a test over like a long elapsed time or something like
They
that,
can
or
change
on a
the
speed up run, just to see like if eventually it blows up out of control, and where they all end up dying from starvation because there's no more
Right.
food, or if the food has like a time on replenishing, if it's stable.
Right.
Stable population.
Well,
There's so much fun, like locusts, like the idea, like when we're overpopulated, what happens? Like you can have a lot of fun ideas there.
I mean, you can put them on a world, and the reproduction rate's high enough, they could take over the whole world because they'll eat their undead, and it just spreads everywhere, so you can adjust those numbers.
Yeah.
So we
Change
should,
as the population grows and shrinks and stuff.
so
It's like
probably,
sea monkeys. Like you have this little thing. The idea is like you can have this little thing on your desktop. Look at the little guys that eat each other. Oh my god.
so I guess the next step would be either reproduction or duplication for those, depending on what method you would
Yeah.
want for that.
I like what you're saying about limited resources too, and like, or like a timer, it goes down to 0, and, or if they, like, if they eat it down to 0, then it doesn't replenish, but if, you know, they're still stupid, but if you have 50 guys eating one, you know, asteroid or anything, and you know, the whole, like, they take out the supply, then they all starve to death. You can see that, you know, it could be almost like, does Fred live? Do the Freds live or the Freds die? Well,
Yeah.
on the next episode, let's see.
So,
This time they died, this
So-
time they lived, this time they made it, you know.
This is actually the old terrarium that was in Flash, that we based it off of. So it functions about the same, but there's just some Flash and,
Obviously, I didn't work on this one.
and then it should be, we'll see, does it work? Yep, all right, so it is already up right now. The code as of we have just now. So,
Awesome.
Thank you for that, that's awesome.
That is very awesome.
so we probably should put a link like on our homepage saying go here for terrarium.
So can I float an idea since that this came up? We've been wondering whether or not there would be any interest in us putting just G prime on Git. Would anyone care? Because we'd really love to kind of get a modding notion going on, but I don't want to throw something out there that no one has any interest in. Would that be of any value to anybody?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
I actually haven't had a chance to, when you guys were presenting it, I was still finishing up dinner.
Okay.
And
First gotta
Fred
eat.
eats food. you
Yeah.
know? And so I mean, I'm sure I'd love to, like, I've been wanting to see more of just the game itself. I saw there's a couple of the kids were playing it earlier today or yesterday, and I was, yeah, if it's on Git, like seeing
Okay.
the ability to mod it and stuff, that's something like for someone like me who's, I want to do software development, I still want to do game development, possibly, you know, maybe not necessarily 9 to 5, but like the ability to just mod, and regardless whether I go in the game industry or the software industry, it's like, hey, I made a mod, you know.
Right on.
And there's a great tool of some people that I know who are making it, you know, I can ask them questions, you know, every once in a while, like,
Yeah.
that would be really valuable to me.
Well, we've already got a level editor that's almost done, and that allows people to make custom levels. But beyond that, we've got a bunch of ideas on the same concept. Like, there's a couple basic mechanics in the game that we think would be really easy to exploit to make totally different game mechanics. So,
Yeah, I think that's like, especially for our group, you know, as we're all kind of helping each other out, like the ability to give feedback to each other, or like, hey, I made something really cool, like a friend, you know, that kind of thing, and being able to, because obviously we're in this big uphill battle against the triple, you know, any indie guys like that, but if we're trying to make an impact on the industry as a whole, that's, I think that's a really good idea.
we'll put that together then.
I
'Cause
think it'd
that's-
be interesting to see if people can combine Fred and G prime.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like the
Where you go
locust,
for your
there you go, there's a
objective and
biblical theme right there, you know,
stuff.
like, you could use that for locusts and, or, you know, or
Yeah.
in villages, or whatever you wanna do.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear
that's
that.
cool.
And we'll make sure we get that taken care of. Does that mean we're done?
Fred Prime, that's good. Fred Subprime Adventure. Fred Subprime.
You said you wanted a Fred in 10 minutes?
Yeah, did you draw Fred?
Here's a Fred.
Good old Fred. Nothing beats Fred. All right.
That's cool.
At least if I remember about those other concepts that someone else did.
So the idea here, kind of world
Looks like an
space
evil
wise, is that
jellyfish kind of
the rain becomes, as it gets more and more dense, it becomes a medium that supports life. So by the time you get into the second, and third, and fourth game, that becomes a major part. And we thought about it all in terms of like kind of
It's nice
aquatic
having
environments,
art
tide
development
pools,
right
this kind of stuff. So
Sorry.
you get
It's nice having
starfish
development
style,
right
I
here.
think critters in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have all the tools I need.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
So
there's
anything, Charlie, are we done? You got anything else? Do you got anything else?